Hi, I'm Joel Persinger from Practical Defense Systems. Thank you very much for watching the podcast episodes. This one's going to be very cool. We're going to have Scott Walker and Carlos, and Dave Weiner's not going to be with us this time. He chickened out. No, actually, he had something else going, but he'll be back with us the next time to talk about not only security from a company perspective, from a law enforcement perspective, but also from a personal perspective for you. We will cover all of those things and different subjects we didn't touch on the last time. So hopefully it will be helpful. Sometimes these can be quite long because it's a discussion. If you would like to speed up the process a little bit, wherever you watch it, whether it's on Rumble or YouTube or on X, you have the ability to change the playback speed. So sometimes these are best watched at 1.25 speed, maybe even 1.5, as long as we're not talking too fast. And that way you can view the whole thing and listen to the whole thing and not necessarily have to spend the entire real length of it. It'll shorten it up quite a bit. All right, let's go talk with Carlos and with Scott. Gentlemen, good morning. Thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it. I realized, as we were saying before we started, I'm not dressed appropriately.
Missed the memo,
you guys,
man.
What I want to know, did you guys have a conference ahead of time to organize the whole Hawaiian shirt thing, or is this just something you just did?
We're synced.
We did it on purpose just to really make sure that you were the odd one on this call.
Just screw with me. And I noticed they're both blue Hawaiian shirts.
Yeah, we're like the new boy band. So that's
and Carlos, out. you think that just because I'm an old man, I'm not ready for you. Hold on.
Here he comes.
It's what happens when you do it live. I'm just saying.
That's it, buddy. I wonder what he's going to come out with.
It could be anything.
I don't think he's ready.
Clown outfit.
Outfit. He's not. I don't think he's ready. I don't think he's ready. That's all I'm going to say.
I am anticipating. Dude, perfect. Nailed it.
You can't. We are on now. This is it.
Now we're a boy band.
Yeah.
Now we're a boy band.
Now, if you're watching this, you get to name us. Oh, wait a minute. That was a dangerous thing to say.
Wait for the comments. Here we go.
What's going to be in the comments now, babe? I have no idea.
There you go.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. The Blue Boys. Hey, we could play blues.
Mm-hmm.
I do play the harmonica, not well. I do play the guitar, not well.
Yeah. We could be like the Beach Boys of the future.
I think we're too old to be the Beach Boys of the future. We might not be around long enough. You never know. All right. Well, anyway, so we went through a list before. Dave is not joining us because he chickened out. So
Some people have obligations.
Yeah, right. I mean, what obligations? Come on now. Seriously? Okay. I guess he does probably. Everybody knows, if you've been watching this group of people, we get together and talk about stuff. You probably know Scott. He was a shallow water sailor. You know that next time we require him to wrap a pool noodle around his neck, or I think better would be one of those little rubber ducky, pool things.
The floaty.
So he's got a floaty as a shallow water sailor. We know he's an Arizona Ranger, which is kind of funny in and of itself. And, former law enforcement guy, international investigator and security contractor extraordinaire like that. And what is the name of the company that you own, Scott?
It's Walker and Associates.
Well, that was really, inventive. How long did you have to work on that?
That was I need to name something.
I need a name. Okay. Yeah. Right. All right. Yeah. Okay.
And I also own Corporate Security University.
Oh, I forgot about that. Corporate Security University. Yeah. And are you a student of Corporate Security University, Carlos?
Absolutely.
Carlos I am his number one student.
Is that right? Really? And Carlos, this is Carlos Santana. He's just masquerading as somebody else.
That's right. That's right.
But any minute a guitar is going to come out. Carlos, what is it you do? Because you haven't been on the show before. Hopefully you're going to come back because you're fun. I like you.
Yeah, man. Well, I've been a very blessed, lucky guy, I got to say blessed and lucky, depending on who's listening to these all the time. I spent a long time working for the Walt Disney Company, where I got a chance to do a lot of undercover stuff for them. I got a chance to do some kind of intelligence investigations, a lot of those things for a very long time. Came out to Silicon Valley in 2015. And I was very lucky again to be one of the directors of Super Bowl 50 and the Great America Complex, which we dealt with a bunch of different things, worked with a bunch of government folks on a lot of different threats that has to do with what I call big people security, which is kind of where I grew up with the Walt Disney Company in Orlando, Florida. And then slowly got into tech and Amazon and now the company I'm with today, which I will not mention. You can just look at me up on LinkedIn and continue to do a lot of amazing things now globally. So, a lot of fun.
So we got a list of stuff. And when Dave was on the last time, we talked about some of these things, the evolution of threats currently, how things are changing, resource limitations. We talked about the fact that law enforcement is shrinking. Security may be shrinking just because we don't have enough people, perhaps, in the future. We actually touched on the cultural shift that needs to happen. I think we all talked about that needs to happen for citizens, where they start taking their own security and safety more seriously and not outsourcing it to law enforcement or outsourcing it to other things. But I think at the same time, even from a corporate perspective, certainly retail stores in nice neighborhoods are figuring out they're going to have to start taking care of security because these flash mobs are coming in and robbing them blind. And we also talked on a little bit about building community. And we talked about that from this perspective of citizens in their neighborhood. But I think maybe there's also some corporate community things we could talk about, building partnerships between corporations to try to keep businesses safe. The things we did not touch upon at the time were where can citizens get more training on this and education on this? We didn't talk about legal and ethical considerations very much, or the rise of non-state actors for terrorism, because it's always been an issue, but it's becoming, I think, a greater one, as I go to InfraGard meetings and that kind of stuff that comes up quite frequently. Non-human threats, things like the next pandemic, cyber, that kind of stuff. We didn't talk about that. Citizens using using things to protect themselves against cyber threats. We might talk about that since, Carlos, you mentioned that a few minutes ago. I mean, to give you an example, obviously, on my computer here, I've got some virus protection and firewall and like that. At the same time, I use NordVPN probably 90% of the time. I use OneRep, which keeps my personal information pretty much off the public sphere, so I'm not easy to find. Not that I'm trying to hide, but I also do have a YouTube channel. I don't want people to show up my door. I've actually had that happen once. It's kind of creepy. Different things that people can do to do that. And then I put in here, didn't have it on the last time, but we're approaching an election that's very contentious, regardless of where you fall on the political sphere or political, end. Right, left, middle, whatever, it's still very contentious. And as we draw closer to it, I wonder what companies and organizations and individuals should be thinking about and what steps they should take to make sure, in case we do have civil unrest or things going on, what should we be talking about? So there's the list. And Carlos, since you're the first guy here, you're gonna be the first victim volunteer.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on any of that? You can get us started and we'll go wherever we go. How about that?
Oh God. So many things. Maybe we'll kick off with a couple things. Threats of the days past, they're not the same threats of today. One of the things that Scott and I we're always confused about is how often, corporations or other companies still set up their, let's call it security systems or their security approach through like a really weird stuff. Like let's say NISPOM, which is a very military based, the operating manual. And they'll use that as if we still have like 1950 Cold War, I don't know, Russian tanks that are still going to somehow show up, in the middle of, I don't know, Detroit or Chicago or New York or San Francisco. I've always thought that was kind of weird, but they use this bomb, Sometimes they'll even go into on the NERCSIP side, It's like, my God, why do you need armed guards here with ARs? Like those threats are 1950s. So let's look at those things, right? Where we're living today, for me, especially on what I'm involved with every day, is the more of that cyber stuff. It's more of the AI intrusion stuff, more of the machine learning stuff, and all of the kind of crypto password driven crypto mechanisms that are out there in the world. Those are like the big thing. Though I am a physical security person guy, and that's what I do. So, of course, someplace still need fence lines that are important, right? Of course, we still need great access control systems that are important. Of course, that we need camera systems in some places, not all, but we need camera systems, and in some cases, depending on really what you're guarding and the risk to your company is the ability to have maybe intrusion detection systems. But in my corporate world, it's not, you can't just create a story that maybe, if you served in a, let's say, theater of war, you can't just use that as your everyday mechanism on how you're going to set up security in the US. So you have to be very corporate risk driven. I can either risk averse or risk transfer or risk. So I focus on a lot of those things, which is quite different than what it was in the past and what it is today. So I'll start there, Joel, and then let's see.
It's interesting that you mentioned the old way of thinking, because I was thinking you were talking about you were with Disney, and I'm imagining showing up with my grandchildren at Disney World, Disneyland, and standing around Disney are guards with ARs. I don't think I'm going to want to take my grandchildren there, because it's obviously, it would say to me, if you guys feel that you need that, this is too dangerous an environment for me to bring my kids. So I think there's a balance there that can sometimes, particularly when you're dealing with any kind of a retail sort of service-oriented or retail type of business where you're dealing with the public, there's a balance between making the public feel better and feel safer and scaring the tar out of them. So yeah, I can see where that would really go sideways. What are your thoughts about any of that? And the other thing you mentioned, which I would love to talk about today, is the rise of AI technology, which is frankly, I'm closer to 70 than I am 60, but this is the fastest growing technology I've ever seen in 66 years of life. I've never seen anything advance as fast as AI seems to be doing. And I realize that at this present, it's more A than I, but I have a feeling that's not going to be the case for much longer. So anyway, what are your thoughts about any of the things that Carlos was mentioning, Scott?
Well, this is what's fun about when we talk about the kind of evolution of threats, because if we're like what Carlos is saying, we were focus a lot of our security posture, and this doesn't matter if you're the CSO of a major corporation or you're the CSO, chief security officer of your family, right? We look at these risks and threats the same way. So we evolved from kind of natural disasters and tribal warfare to maybe threats from industrial accidents as the industrial revolution's kicking off, to now we're in this kind of world where we if we're preparing for the World War II approach, and that's what Carlos is saying here with gates, guards, and guns. And if that's the only thing that's where your security posture begins and ends, that's concerning, because to your point, with the evolution of technology, your cyber backdoor is not covered, right? Or your other threats, potential threats from AI, or what is a threat from just telemarketers or people that can contact you and make you click that link or make you communicate with them in some way, and then you think you're talking to your bank and you're not. So we've kind of evolved to be much more technically the fraudsters, or the threat is much more technical. However, many of the people in our society are not. Even though everybody has an iPhone, everybody has some type of technology device that fits in their pocket or they wear on their wrist, they still don't understand the complexities there, and they still don't understand the risks there. And then, of course, the news media does not help this at all, because they'll pump it up as this is the end, and this is something that is incredibly complex, and you'll never understand it, and it's happening to your next door neighbor. And so
does the
people
news
freak
media
out.
tend to push that? I mean, it seems like, you get back to, you said guards and guns and don't forget to buy physical gold, and don't forget to buy,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Right. I mean, does the media drive this sort of narrative for people to believe that we're still in, to the 1950s where security is concerned? Is that
Yeah, I think
is that
so.
a problem, or is that just
If
something
it
that we,
bleeds, it leads. This is the same.
yeah.
The media, by the way, the media has not changed since yellow journalism we had at the turn of the century. So, it has
Well, they
always
almost
been something.
drive the tribal warfare that you
They
called it. I mean, they
do.
pretty much want that because if they have the division, they have something to publish.
Well,
They have something
especially
to get
now.
eyeballs on whatever they're doing.
Everything's about eyeballs, and this is why if you're only a headline reader, you're missing 90% of the story because headlines catch attention and catch clicks and likes and shares and all these things, but people don't take the time to understand it. And I think that's the real problem is your own and it's all politicized now, right? It's
Yeah.
on the left or the right, unfortunately, and there's not a lot of kind of centrist news media. One thing I've seen is the rise of things like, not to throw out names here, but like ground news that will tell you where is this news story falling? Is it going down the middle politically or left or right? How crazy is that we're in, a modern time and we've taken information that we thought was going to free us and make us smarter, and we've now divided into two factions. That's the stupidest thing that we could do. Information is power, and I think the powers that be, media, anybody in social media or mainstream media has figured that out, and they're able to utilize that to drive a narrative, and that's unfortunate.
You mentioned social media. It seems to me that social media drives the idea of being a headline only reader because whether you're on Instagram or Threads, I've never looked at, or X, or pick one, right? It doesn't matter. You're you're scrolling through it on your phone so fast that you're basically getting hit with the images that you want to click on, or the headline you want to click on. And so I wonder if it doesn't drive a short attention span and encourage a short attention span, which probably doesn't help. You mentioned AI again, and that came up again. I guess, AI can be a great thing and can be wonderful, or it could be really bad. And I don't know if it could be just sort of in the middle. It seems like people are either on one side of the fence or the other. How does AI affect the corporate security world?
Yeah, so for me, I always talk about two different things a lot that kind of scare me a little bit. AI, I think of more of like a human being, and then there's machine learning. First of all, here's a couple of things. One, we're definitely losing awesome security folks because the industry is just
Yeah.
it's a tough one out there. It's not easy to get amazing folks to really be excited about security. Mostly because we're not like Europe. Europe, in order for you to be a security person, you have to have some education. Where in the US, it just might be a job that your best friend was able to attain right after high school and you jumped on with them. But it wasn't really your career path, and that's not what you were going to do. Where in Europe is a little bit different. So we tend to not have longevity of folks that are staying in our industry, and they're very tough to get real good ones that care about it. So that's one thing. So every time we still go to GSX, every time we go, ISC and all those things, it's like we hear a lot of AI, and truly it's machine learning still. There's a lot of people in the back making sure that the machine is learning faster and faster and faster, and that's what it is. And then, but they call it AI, where everything is done by itself. That's not how it works. You have to still input a lot in the software in the background for it to kind of put it together. So that's one thing. But the second thing is that you have a lot of other things coming up. Quantum computing is one that I think it's going to be a huge threat for us. So AI is kind of what Scott was saying. I think we'll be able to copy, let's say, my voice, copy me, my video of me, and one day I'll be able to call my wife and ask for my wife, hey, what was that password again that we had? And it wasn't me at all, right? It was AI.
That's right.
So that's kind of social um, engineering. That's part of social engineering. Quantum computing won't need that. So all the passwords that we have, all the systems, the cryptology that we use today, either emails to go from one person to another, will all be challenged by quantum computing because of the speed in which the mathematics behind of it work. From the time that I send an email from me to you, Joe, the computing was already done and figured out the crypto that was attached to that email that only your email address and you could open. And so those are going to be actually more scarier of challenges for the security industry than I think AI will be right off the get-go. Though, quantum computing is a little far out, but we got the Cleveland clinics working extremely hard with IBM. They just released a huge quantum computing computer that's out there. They're figuring out more and more and more how to keep quantum computers cooled. And because that's the main issue, there's a lot of qubits, and I'm not going to geek out on that stuff, but so the threats of yesterday, right, are definitely not the threats that we need to be focusing on today. And so I'll just throw that out there. I'd love to hear what you guys think.
Does the threat always also become the defensive tool? In other words, when I was in high school, for example, I'm 66. When I was in high school, we actually got the first computer terminal connected to the computer that was at San Diego State. Now, the computer at San Diego State, because I'd never seen a computer in my life, took up an entire floor of a building. And one of the wonderful things it would do is play chess with you. So you sat down as a class, we played chess against a computer, and you would sit down at the old teletype machine, and it would spit out the yellow teletype paper. And you'd put in your move, queen to king's bishop 3 or whatever. And then you could go have a cup of coffee. You could almost go to lunch, and you'd come back, and it would go pap, 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 and it would finally give you its answer. And then you would go back again. Well, now we're in this world where we use technology, criminals use technology to attack our technology, and we use our technology to defend against the technological attack. Does that also apply to things like AI and quantum computing? So you have the fear of quantum computing. Are we one day going to have quantum computers developing, you mentioned encryption, for example, developing encryption levels that are difficult for quantum computers to decrypt?
Yeah, I mean, there are folks working on that right now. And man, I was just on a panel there in Phoenix not long ago with a doctor of quantum computing that was solely focused on working on the security features that we would need for quantum to fight quantum computing itself. And man, I wish I could remember, but it's the only one I've ever heard. So I think we're behind, obviously, the ball on working on these things where everybody else is not, and that's usual. I mean, we're so slow in everything that we do. We're like old dinosaurs, regardless of what it is in all of our industry. And by the way, even in law enforcement, sometimes in military, we hate change, and Scott and I talk about the future all the time, and because we're open to it, and those who are open to change are the future leaders of tomorrow. That's what my mom used to say. But it's like we are always behind, and we need to stop doing that in the security industry. We're always running after the fact of something happening. Well, something happened. Now let's try to put out this fire. We have to be more open-minded and really attack what the future is going to hold. And by the way, support those that are doing it. We're also very bad as an industry supporting each other. They're doing great things, and we should be more open-minded to that,
Yeah, it's an interesting thing that you're saying, Carlos. Scott, I wonder what your thoughts are on this, because we've talked about this before. We launch forward with new innovative things because the drive is to build the innovation and make money. We don't want to spend money. We want to make money. Providing some avenue of protecting ourselves from whatever Frankenstein we're creating at the moment costs money. And so we tend to do that after Frankenstein has eaten half the planet. You know what I mean? Oh, crap, we should have, would have, could have. That's what I see happening with artificial intelligence, and I suspect that's happening in these other veins as well. One of the reasons probably Elon Musk has been driven to try to develop XAI is because he sees that coming as well. Either that, or he's a really clever bad guy who's convinced us he's all a good guy. I don't know. But I hope it's not that, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on any of these things?
I think Elon absolutely could be an alien from another planet.
I think he is an alien because he won't wear a blue Hawaiian shirt. That's the problem.
Agreed. He could easily join our boy band, but he didn't.
Right?
He's in. Yeah, he's in. Yeah, it's interesting. These threats are evolving, and I think when we talk about Elon and what he's trying to do, and he has been really forward leaning on a lot of things, right? And so now he's kind of created an industry um, that can only be forward leaning. So you think about the what Silicon Valley has done for the world, and I don't consider Silicon Valley necessarily to be one physical place in just in the United States.
Right.
I think it's a global community of forward thinkers. And so when you have somebody like Elon, who's pushing the boundaries, what it does is it shows a community of, hey, we can push boundaries and we can succeed. And then it shows the financial services industry, which we can't move companies forward without oftentimes venture capitalists, or which are also called vulture capitalists, right? So that you have to have money to make money, right? People can no longer just like, I invented this thing and it took me a year and $50 and I put it together and now it's $1 billion idea. That doesn't happen anymore. You have to spend, a lot of capital and a lot of time and energy on creating something that's going to be kind of explosive or that will like the change the world technology, like a reusable rocket. Boeing heads up. You probably want to work with those guys, not a broken Starliner. But I digress. Too soon.
That's
Yeah.
funny.
Hey, at least it came back in one piece. It landed. It's all good.
Yeah.
SpaceX has to save
Yeah,
the
I think
crew, but whatever.
I think it's interesting looking at the whole Starliner thing and SpaceX thing is a lot of that I think is driven by the fact that Boeing, by virtue of the fact that the vast majority of their money comes from government, has become sort of a government entity in a weird sort of way,
Yep.
because so many of those larger companies, in order to function well, in order to function in such a way that they can get the government money, they have to operate like the government does. Elon does not do that, obviously, and so as a result, he's more innovative. In my lifetime, I can tell you I've noticed that government can do very few things as efficiently, effectively, or inexpensively as the private sector can do, because the private sector is required to make money. The private sector is required to go back to stockholders and say, this is what we did, this is why we did it, and this is how you're going to get some money out of it. Whereas the government doesn't have to go back to taxpayers and say that. I wish they did, but
Right.
they don't.
Yeah, and I'll just add a couple more thoughts, if you don't mind, Joel, on
Sure, of course.
the stuff that I was saying. So, there are a lot of people today that are working on like post-quantum cryptography stuff that's going to help us. But a lot of them are not really thinking of the security needs for it. A lot of them are doing like quantum, what they call quantum like resistant algorithms on how to resist the algorithm that quantum is building itself. So there are some folks that are doing that. And I hope that we get to these kinds of things because all of the methods that we use today, RSA, ECC with the encryption stuff and the elliptical curve encryption stuff, like all of that will be almost nothing compared to what quantum is going to be able to do. So that's that. And then, there's a bunch of other stuff like blockchain. Blockchain is an interesting thing because, they were using that in order to kind of do crypto, right? Cryptocurrency and save money. Blockchain would be a really interesting one for us to use because with blockchain, who, when, how, where, you have an entire kind of list of exactly what's happening. So maybe we'll get there as well. But anyways, I'll finish all of that kind of, I don't know, geeky, techie stuff right there. But we need to kind of work on.
I had to sit up taller because it was all whizzing over my head. So if I sat up taller, maybe I'd catch a little of it. So I get it.
But that's kind of like where I see a lot of threats and really getting security folks to learn like how does corporate think of risk compared to how you thought of risk in the military or law enforcement. They're two very different things. For exactly what you just said, Joel, is that companies have to make money. Government does not, in a way. Military, they get a big budget and they have things like NISPOM that says you will do this. And that's it. And they're going to do it. Where companies don't have to do that. And they really have to use risk methodologies to make security decisions as well. And we got to actually get better at that. We got to get more educated as security practitioners in the corporate security industry where I come from on how to think as a corporation, as a business.
Well, we've talked about digital a lot. Let's see if we
Yeah.
can move to a couple of other things that are one is pressing right now, which is the whole election thing. This thing is very contentious. Do you think that that's going to be a security issue as we get closer to it? If so, in what way? Who does that affect? How do we prepare? Do we prepare? Are we prepared? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, we're seeing, certainly a lot of strong statements from our law enforcement partners around the world, around the U.S., saying that they aren't going to tolerate any kind of election interference or for lack of a better term, the stalking of election officials. But I think people in the United States, or at least are severely concerned that their vote won't be counted or that there will be election interference from somebody else or from election officials that may be politically one way or the other. And I don't know how we get around that, but what I do know, law enforcement, which is a good hammer, law enforcement's very engaged in most places. The challenge is that do we have enough law enforcement to do this? And my answer is we don't, and we won't. And if we continue down this path of division, these election concerns for election security will continue. And I think it will only get worse as we move into future elections. And we saw this with the attempted assassination of former President Trump. And what I would explain, it was interesting the reaction from people on both sides of the aisle, right? Some people thought that it was a conspiracy. Some people were elated that it had happened, or they were disappointed with the outcome. And all of those things are tragic and demonstrate how divided we are as a company, or excuse me, as a country. So that we need to move past that. I don't care what elected official, what side of the aisle they stand on. Any assassination attempt is an attempt to subvert democracy. We use these labels, we say communism, socialism, all those things, and then we apply them to human beings to desensitize everybody to, oh, I might just be, well, they're a communist and they're trying to put that into my experience. I don't want that, so I'm going to take violent action. And so I think this is going to be an incredible challenge for communities all around the United States. And we've got to figure out how to um, prepare for an election appropriately, ensure its security. I mean, everybody wants a secure election. Nobody doesn't want that. How do you make it transparent? How do you, ensure that the right people are voting, or the people that can and should be voting are? Now, all those things are really important conversation pieces, but
Well,
we
I think that's
politicize.
okay. So I'm just going to challenge one thing you just said because I think that's not true. I don't think everybody wants a secure election. I think regular Americans want a secure election. If there wasn't a risk of not having a free and fair election because people cheat in elections, then there would be no reason for law enforcement to be making these public statements that they're not going to tolerate any election interference. So I think propagating that notion is just propagating a lie. Everybody doesn't. They're all. That's like saying everybody wants to be safe everywhere they go. Everybody wants to make sure that people aren't stealing. No, of course, thieves want to steal, right? Now, I'm not saying that there's a majority of people on either side who want to cheat. I'm just saying that people cheat, okay, and we have to admit that to start from there. Otherwise, where do we go? I guess my question would be in what you were saying is you made a great point, and that is law enforcement is a hammer, but as the old saying goes, everything is not a nail.
That's right.
And so one of my concerns is that if law enforcement approaches this like a hammer, no matter how they do it, no matter what they do, no matter where they apply that tool in that way, it is going to be perceived as if they hammered one group of people and did not hammer the other one. How do we get
Yeah.
to the point where we no longer automatically view every application of law enforcement or every application of security in that vein, where the average American, who is honestly a law-abiding, hardworking citizen, does not constantly see division when maybe there isn't any?
I think law enforcement needs to do that outreach and offer experiences. Law enforcement is not all law enforcement agencies are good at communicating with their constituents, and many find it very hard. There is a an air of secrecy around what they do. They can't talk about everything, but I think if we demystify and rehumanize our law enforcement partners, and demonstrate that to these communities, people will have a greater understanding of how difficult it is to police any community. But I think for the most part, there's so much secrecy around what they do and how they do it because like there's legitimate safety concerns for law enforcement officers and what they do in their operations and things like that. So opening it up, conversations and having these conversations early and often with people. I mean, we've heard from elected officials that they want more security, personal security for themselves. They feel threatened. There's more division in community meetings. I mean, I oftentimes watch these videos of community meetings where some come up. We in Arizona, where a young lady came up and she was pontificating on whatever and making accusations against city council. And she was asked to leave. She refused to leave. So she was arrested. And her claim is I was arrested because I was using the First Amendment appropriately. And, I'm not going to get into the politics of that or dig into the reasons, but we've got this division with our communication even. And it's because nobody is willing to see anybody else's side anymore. And I think I
think we've lost that. It's a terrible thing. We used to be able to agree to disagree without being disagreeable, but we can't do that anymore.
That's right.
And it's even my statement, and I know somebody in the comments is going to take my statement earlier that there's always somebody cheating in an election, that only one side cheats in an election. That's not true. Both sides cheat in elections.
That's right.
Okay? They both do. They do it all the time, and they've been doing it for a long, long, long time. Yeah. Now you can say, well, yeah, but we caught these. Yeah, but I get it. But both sides cheat. All right. And if you can't admit that, you live in a cave. Okay. They both cheat.
Totally agree.
They just do. All right. Now that doesn't mean that the majority of them cheat, but they do. I think the concern that I have here is that we've become so polarized and myopic that we're unwilling to realize that basic truth, that there's always bad apples in every group. And then you're right. I mean, I look at law enforcement's job as very difficult because they have to apply some sort of control to this without appearing to be on one side or taking sides. And no matter what they do, I think at this point, they're going to be the average. Here's the thing. The leader of whatever agency, pick one, I don't care, may be very political, but most of the time the officers on the street are not. They're just trying to do their job, and yet they're getting hammered because of that. I guess as we talk about this is a danger for the public, but I think this is also a danger for companies, Carlos, because if as an American society, we don't have confidence that our elections are actually coming up with accurate results, and we don't have confidence that our law enforcement agencies are actually applying the law evenly and fairly, we're going to start seeing companies popping smoke and leaving this country, I think, or taking some other steps that they need to take in order to, I don't know. How does this apply to a corporation like Disney or the one you work for now?
A couple of thoughts came to mind right away, Scott, as you were speaking. If you have not read The President's Secret Service, great quick book written by a couple of Secret Service folks 15 years ago or so, I want to say. It really gives you a great idea on what the Secret Service really is about. And it's very open about their lack of a lot of things. And just pick up the book. I make $0 from that book, but it's called The President's Secret Service. I actually just handed it over to my mother-in-law that's visiting us, and she had a lot of questions because, a lot of family members think just because you're in this industry, all of a sudden you are the expert on everything as security, guns, and bad guys, right? Bombs and bad guys. And so she's reading that. The second thing I wanted to say on your primary question, what the citizens should be aware of, like when it comes to the election stuff. for me, it's more important that the citizens are aware of what they do individually. Like you said, Joel, if there's anything to gain, people will try to cheat at, okay? Regardless of what it is. That's pretty much that simple. And so what do people need to really think about? Look, the destruction of the country, the polarization side of it, don't be part of it. The second piece, I think it's even more important, the destruction of families. Like people are taking this thing so crazily serious that family members are more and more and more not talking to each other at all. And they're breaking great relationships because of this. So the mind, the heart, the psychological issue that people are going through, especially in the past 4.5, 5 years, right? That's already too much anyway. So as a human, what you should think about is really take a deep breath, think of what's going on, think of what's really important to you and your family and what you can affect every single day, and focus on that more and more. So that's, I think, the big threat to the citizens more than anything else. Obviously, who the policies that are passed for each side of the house are slightly different, you know. And companies. So you talk about companies. Companies have to be really aware to toe that middle line more and more and more. And I think what you're going to see this time around more than ever, and I'm not going to name any companies, but I think there's a lot of companies that are quasi news companies now that I think you will see that there's more of that middle toting line than just going one way or the other. I think that all the companies are very conscious of that more and more and more, to where a lot of the companies, the CEOs are coming out with letters and they're coming out with things saying, you know, it was like this 4 years ago. It would not be like this again. You know, so I think they're realizing it and they're trying to become better at what they're doing. Now, no companies, like you said, Joe, wants the government that involved in their business. That it is what it is, though they try more and more. Companies that are leading the way, like in, you know, in technology, obviously you get more scrutiny. And the only reason why they're going to get more scrutiny, Joe, is because it didn't exist. Now it exists, and there's some policing that needs to be done. And I think all the companies are aware that that comes with some policies, you know, brought down by the feds or individual states. You know, California has their own data protection.
California has a lot of their own.
Well, yeah, I mean, they have their own,
I
right?
live in California as well as
Well,
Arizona, so I can tell you. And I have a business in California. Trust me.
yeah,
They
they have
regulate
their
the
own.
tar out of you. They do.
Yeah, they have their own protection of data. Europe
Yeah,
has GDPR. India has their own style of data protection as well.
sure.
So, and so those things come. But yeah, I don't know if I really answered anything because I
No,
had
you
so
did. And
many
I think
thoughts
one of
in
the
my
things
mind.
you highlighted is, you know, when Bud Light becomes a verb, they were Bud Lighted. Oh, these company needs to be Bud Lighted, right?
Yeah.
When Bud Lighted becomes a verb,
Yeah.
companies have to start walking down that middle road, because a
Yeah.
company's job is to make money for its investors. It's not to start going down political bents. And companies have done it. And I think in the past they could get away with it, but I'm not so sure that they can get away with that anymore. I mean, you know, every time YouTube, which is, you know, obviously owned by Google, every time YouTube bans or restricts a video, you know, everything goes bananas. And it doesn't matter what the video is, I don't think, as much as it's the fact that they banned it. And
Yeah.
it just goes sideways from there. So I think any kinds of, I don't know. And that's why I'm looking for input from you guys. It would seem to me that companies at some point might be wise to leave the politics out of it to the degree that they can and just focus on providing the service or the product that they provide to their customers and treating the customers well and making money for the stockholders and leaving the politics out of it, because it doesn't seem to be, I mean, which company wants to be, for lack of a better phrase, Bud Lighted? I know I certainly wouldn't want to be. What do you guys think of? Am I on track with that?
Well, I think right now it's really hard for companies because they're trying. We have these DEI initiatives, and there's a lot of companies that are trying to appeal to a certain demographic to recruit new people and recruit and retain people and those kinds of things. And so they're stuck in this. Well, you know, the world is changing. Business how it was done isn't going to be done in the future the same way. And then we have a whole new generation of millennials and Gen Z that are coming in that want things to be different. They want things to change. And many of them are this is what's really cool about this new generation of people. They are very conscientious about who they work for. So, for example, if you have a big company, a big international company that has um, a byproduct of some sort where it could be seen as polluting, will you get as many millennials and Gen Zs that want to join your company or your organization if there's some kind of alleged evil acts that the company is involved in, or it's not politically aligned a certain way, or it operates in a certain part of the world that maybe makes a population pays a population less than other populations. I mean, there's so much. I'm trying to dance around terms here, but there is so much that happens in these companies where they're very concerned with how they're perceived. And there's also a lot of misinformation out there that can be leveraged against a company. And so many of them, I believe, are making the decision, we're going to come out one way or the other. We're just going to have to. We're going to make a choice and we're going to do it. And to your point, I think I don't really care what Bud Light does with their brand. I don't watch commercials. I pay for my TV, my television, my entertainment.
I don't own a television.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Right.
But yeah,
actually, I do. It's in the classroom. We'll use it for class. Now that I think about it, yeah.
You want one TV.
That's it.
Yeah,
and it's not connected to anything other than the laptop I plug into it. So there you go.
But that's you're not being influenced by commercialization.
Yeah.
And I think that's what all these companies are worried about is how will we be perceived if we do one thing or another, and they can't win. There's no way to win.
I mean, are they being, it sounds to me like what you're describing is a no-win situation because they're being pressured by government requirements on the one side, and those government requirements sometimes push them to do things that aren't palatable to some or all of their customers on the other side. And so, but in order to stay in business, they got to obey the rules the government puts on them. But in order to stay in business, they got to make their cuts. That seems to me, particularly if you're a large company and you're providing services or products internationally. If you are a Google or you're a Anheuser-Busch or you're a Coca-Cola or you're a Meta or you're an X or whatever, pick one. That strikes to me as a really tough line to try to walk down. And I mean, how do corporations actually do that? And do it well so they can A, stay in business, and B, not make so many people mad at them that it becomes a huge security risk. I mean, what do they do, Carlos? That just seems almost unmanageable to me.
Well, I got a couple of thoughts. If you're a smaller company and you always came out, Chick-fil-A comes to mind, right? You always came out as a certain religion, and that's what you do, then that's fine, because that's your business, that's your model, that's how you came out from the beginning. Big companies today has to toe the center line. There's no way around it anymore because you will get it from, like you said, one side or the other, and it's the safest way to do. The way they do it is through, obviously, backdoor dealings through lobbyists. And all these big companies, by the way, have a tremendous amount of lobbyists in DC that are continually working for them, for the policies that they're trying to convey to the world, so on and so forth. That's how it should be done. That's how it's always been done. Not so much publicly, where you see today. I mean, I could think of the Walt Disney Company a couple of years ago with the governor of Florida and the issues that they had because of one comment that at the time the Disney CEO made, which he's no longer the CEO of the Walt Disney Company, right? He was gone within a year after making that comment, and Bob Iger came back.
That cost them bitterly, didn't it?
Oh God, tremendously.
Yeah.
And so I think publicly they're going to toe the center line, and they're going to do the same thing big corporations have always done through lobbyists in DC, doing things behind closed doors so they're not so out there, right? And as simple as, look, if I'm going to give $5,000 to the Republicans, I'm giving $5,000 to the Democrats, right?
Yeah, okay.
And I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it that way and continue to allow the lobbyists on the back end to do the work that they were hired to do, which is to work on behalf of these companies, and rightfully so. I mean, that's just how politics work, Joe. Like, and that's, but not so much publicly anymore. I think that's going to stop. They're going to go back to the old ways of doing things.
And I think, I think people are unaware of the fact that that is not necessarily evil.
Right.
Okay, for
Right.
example, I mean, I own a small business and we contribute to the campaigns of politicians that we like and don't necessarily contribute to the campaigns of politicians we don't like. And some
Sure.
of that might be because my wife and I own the company and we have a political mindset or we have a belief structure or whatever. Some of it may be because that politician is going to do something in Sacramento or wherever that's going to benefit our business, and where this politician is going to do something that's going to harm us. So, but being a small business, much, much smaller than Chick-fil-A, and you mentioned a small business, we can get away with that because we've always been that way.
Mhm.
And our customers know that. And then we're in a business where it kind of leans one way, particularly politically anyway. So we don't have that problem. But I think the bigger you get, the bigger the problem becomes. And then the other thing I thought I'd mention, because it kind of came up in conversations we were talking, is the behavior of people. When I was growing up, I was taught two wrongs don't make a right. And we've lost that too. So now you have maybe this is a CEO of a major company that's made Bud Light. I'll pick on Bud Light here. I'm so sorry. So if you're from Bud Light, I apologize. I'm not trying to pick on you. I'm just using it as an example because Bud Light, people went after Bud Light. They went after Target. They went after some others. Maybe I should pick on Target. So if you're the CEO of Target and you make some decision with your display and now people are seriously pissed and you're having dinner at a restaurant and somebody identifies you're the CEO of Target. Now they're in the restaurant. You could be a political figure or whatever. And they're chanting and carrying on and disturbing the dinner you're trying to have with your family in the restaurant. First of all, that behavior, I'm just going to lay it out here, is completely unacceptable. I don't care who it is you're mad at. When they're having dinner with their family, leave them alone. Let them go and have their dinner. But what happens is one group of people does that, and the other group says, well, they did it, so I guess it's okay for, and it just sort of, it goes down the porcelain fixture. I mean, or you can say it escalates or whatever. I think at some point or other, as individuals, we have to go back to, no, this is acceptable behavior and this isn't acceptable behavior. And even though somebody I disagree with is doing X, doesn't mean I get to do X as well because because Mamaw taught me right when I was a kid, two wrongs don't make a right.
Yeah. Marketing, I'll tell you. So marketing should be viewed by companies more and more and more. If I'm the CEO of a company today, more and more and more of reputational risk, not so much financial risk. Financial risk as in every ad costs millions and millions of dollars to put together. Every marketing idea for any of these big companies costs millions and millions of dollars. What is it going to look at our reputation? And they need to spend more time really thinking about those things and doing that, because obviously reputational risk, there's a cost to it, as you mentioned Bud Light. We know what happened there, but so they need to take that as a risk, as a corporate risk, and people need to get involved in making those decisions and not allow marketing people, which are usually traditionally artists. Like, I don't mind artists if they want to stay artists and say what they want to say, how they want to say, paint what they want to paint, do whatever it is, create something. They're creators. Right? If they want to say whatever they want to say, great. And that's why the artists are still out there picking a side. By the way, look around. CEOs that made decisions 4 years ago that picked one or the other candidate from these big corporations, they're no longer doing that this year.
No,
they're not doing it.
No.
And that's not only them, but also even on the artistry side of things, most of the folks that are big in the industry. I think The Rock was just an example I saw the other day.
Just even the other day, of like 2 days ago, right?
Yeah, even The Rock was like, "Hey, hold on." I grew up listening to a guy named Usher as a young man, and even Usher was asked, and he's like, "Hey,
on The View," and he dodged that. He bobbed and weaved through that. I thought, Usher, you should be a boxer, babe. I mean, that was some amazing moves you had going on there.
And he's from Atlanta, where we know Atlanta leans very one way.
Yeah.
And so what you're seeing is that. So that's kind of like my view on these things. And leave the artist. You got to check on the artist every once in a while if you're a corporation.
Well, I want to go back and say it again. Look, just because we disagree with somebody doesn't mean we get to cause them harm.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing too is that you want to cause that person harm. That person has employees and family around them. You get some corporate CEO, obviously, if they feel like they're going to be caused harm, the company's going to hire somebody to go with them to keep them safe. So now you got some security people who are getting paid to keep an individual safe, which is an honorable profession, and now you've put them at risk as well. So I think we got to get to the point where we don't default to, I'm going to go attack someone verbally, physically, or whatever because I disagree with them. We've got to get back to a society where we can agree to disagree without being disagreeable. And I don't know how we get there. I don't know how it's going to happen. I hope that it does. Well, we've talked about companies a lot. We got a couple other things here, and we're running really long, but I really appreciate you guys. You're amazing. I guess we talked about cyber a lot. It seems to me that at one point or another, talking about the way we used to look at security, we used to be worried about getting blown up when I was a kid, it was duck and cover, right? Because if the nuclear bomb is coming, if you were hiding under your school desk, somehow you were safe.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
We all realized that was complete nonsense, but it gave the kids something to do. But that's not, yes, that's a threat. World War III is a threat, of course. And, depending on what we do in the world, we could certainly bring that about. And there's a lot of, beating the drum on that's coming and whatever. But there are other non-state actors out there. What are businesses? I guess my first question would be, are businesses concerned about that? And from a violence perspective, we've talked about cyber. And should the average citizen be concerned about that? And if so, why?
Well, if you look at CEOs, when they're polled every year on their top risks or their top threats, cybersecurity is like very high in their list of concerns. The interesting thing is, I don't know that translates to funding or execution or more protection around their business. I think very often, sure, it's a threat. It's on the risk board. It's something that they're concerned about. I don't know that they're always thinking about how do we mitigate it. I think they're aware of it being a risk. So for many corporations, if they haven't had some type of breach or cyber attack or some type of risk executed through cyber means, they're going to. And if they haven't, they're very lucky. And it can be anything. By the way, we keep talking about the technology component of cybersecurity, but it could also be an insider threat that has a cyber component. They're downloading, a customer database to their own personal database and then leaving the company, stuff like that. So I think it is interesting to see that the top risks are and continue to be, and maybe even probably for the last 15 years, I would say, cybersecurity has been an increasing concern. But I think it's very there aren't enough people that have that training and experience to be progressive and be forward leaning again in the saddle on how do we defend against these cyber attacks. And it comes down to a cost benefit analysis. We see this in corporate security all the time when we're talking about physical security risks. And well, do we need new cameras? Do we need to put barriers here? Do we need to, they're weighing, many organizations are weighing the cost benefit analysis of, if I do X, is there a return of Y? But I think a lot of organizations forget the government component of that. And Carlos mentioned GDPR, CCPA, these data protection acts around the world are governments are going to hammer companies for these breaches. And not only is it a fiduciary breach, potentially fiduciary loss to an organization, a company, the government's going to come in and leverage fines or penalties of some sort, but that reputational risk is huge. And do people now trust you with that information? And it could, when we talk about information, we're not always talking about your social security number and your bank account. We're also talking about your email and your phone number, your date of birth, and things that people do. I don't care if somebody has my email, it'll go to spam. And it's more than being worried about that one very small piece, because fraudsters put together a whole picture on people,
Yeah.
right? Not just fraudsters, but foreign governments. So
Yeah.
we've got, sponsored actors, threat actors. They're
Yeah.
putting together profiles on people and
Well,
companies.
I was going to tell you, man, like financial fraud, big things in companies right now. And, those things, they'll never change. They'll still come through malware, phishing,
Mhm.
attacks, trying to get into data breaches. And then the second one, you're going to have to have like a financial intelligence team. I think a lot of companies are going to have to do that in the future. But here's the other big risk I see, Joe, as well, that I hate this, by the way, but the companies are becoming more global every day. And you got to have somebody looking out for geopolitical issues because you said there's this thing about World War III coming up, right? Well,
Yeah.
there's a heck of a lot of political instability that's going on, corruption that's going on through these governments that are out there. That's always a problem. Like sanctions that are up every single day. So, for example, if you don't have somebody that is in that country that are focusing 100% on the laws and regulations of those countries, that could be a big risk for your company and your threats and what's going on. So, just throwing a couple more things there. Like I said, we could probably do this, Joe, for a very long time.
Well, no, yeah, we absolutely could. We'll have more conversations, and we're about to run out of time, I think. But um, to your point, Carlos, I mean, this is something that just happened in Brazil with X and Starlink and all these things, which is where they got sideways of the law there. Whether you want to say that the judge there was a criminal or not a criminal, I don't know anything about Brazilian politics, so I can't say. And
Well,
certainly,
I was born there. I could
were
tell
you?
you that.
Yeah,
I could
okay.
tell you that. Yeah, there's a reason why a lot of people are still calling it a third world country, though the GDP of it is like the fifth largest, and they do really well. But people still call Brazil a third world country. Those things, the ethics have been missing from Brazil for a very long time.
Like Mexico.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I mean, and if you're from Mexico and you're mad at me, well, get over it because it's the truth. Um, very, very interesting discussion, guys. Very interesting discussion. All right, last thoughts,
I say
Scott.
be resilient. Be the chief security officer of your own family and of your own circle of friends. We cannot rely on somebody else to help us anymore. I grew up in California. As you know, Joel, I was in the Northridge earthquake, and living in Northridge, we had earthquake supplies, we had water supplies. Everything worked out fine for us. But then flash forward to 2005, and I know we've had other issues since then, but during Hurricane Katrina, we had people who didn't have the means or the knowledge or the sufficiency to be self-sufficient. And so they had to rely on the government to save them, to help them recover, right? We need to, as much as possible, humanly possible, be self-sufficient in our own families and in our own communities.
And this applies,
Yeah.
I think not just to physical security, but also the things we've been talking about. I mean, you mentioned everybody's got an iPhone, everybody's got a well, that increases the risk of your stuff being stolen if you're an individual, doesn't it? The fact that you have all these various different
Certainly
devices,
makes it
right?
easier,
I
but that's
mean,
where
Yeah.
knowledge
everybody's
comes
got
in.
one of these, right? And
Yeah.
so it's a tag on your butt everywhere you're going, but it certainly makes taking your stuff easier, particularly if you're not mindful. If your password is password,
Don't click the link, Joel. Don't click
don't
the link.
right because your password is password. You might want to go back and change that. All right, Carlos. First of all, Carlos, thank you for coming on the show. You're a joy. I'm really grateful you came. I hope you'll do it
Thanks.
again. What
Thanks,
are your
Joe.
last thoughts,
I
sir?
appreciate it. Yeah, a couple of things of what he said. I actually wrote a paper a long time ago that disasters are a low income problem. I'd love to talk about that in the future. So, Scott, we should probably
That's a
my
good one.
master's is
Okay, we're
from
going
the
to do
great.
it. I just love the title. We're going to do a whole podcast on that.
Yeah, I know. My master's from the Great American Military University in crisis emergency management. So, but what I want to say is this: we have to be more open as we learn from each other. So, benchmarking should be the key to everyone. Benchmarking should be cross benchmarking, not just private industry to private industry. It needs to be all the way across from government to private and those other things. That's the only way that we're going to get better as we go into the future with all the risks that are around in the future. So we need to find a way to be more open-minded to those things and share openly and go from there. I think that's the only way that's going to make it better. And then the other thing that I wanted to say is that if you're making decisions and you are a leader of a great corporation in the security side, make sure you're making decisions that are risk-based and they're not just because of some idea of what you thought in your past career. Most of us have a past career that we came from law enforcement, military, usually, not everyone. But make sure that you're making great business decisions based on business risks. Risk modeling, not just some idea of what you thought. Like I said, they were still in some kind of an issue with Russia, and Russian tanks are going to show up in front of your gates in the middle of New York City. So let's do that. Let's become more risk educated and benchmark from each other, both corporately and through the government industries.
Don't let the fact that you happen to like Red Dawn as one of your favorite movies influence you into believing that North Korea is going to have tanks in your neighborhood.
The Patrick Swayze Red Dawn. The Patrick
yes, that,
Swayze
right. If you're going to watch
This-
one, watch the one that's worth watching, which has got Patrick Swayze in it. The other one, I'm not so sure. But I don't want to get into being a movie critic. All right, here's my last thoughts. I'm looking at you guys' backgrounds. I got Scott here has got 5,000 challenge coins over there. I'm just old, so I've just got junk.
I've run out of space.
Look at the I love me wall behind Carlos. Is that cool or
it's
what?
A wall of knowledge.
The wall of knowledge. It's like the cone of silence, only different.
Yeah. The funny thing is, I've been trying to record more on that side of my office.
Too late.
Didn't get a chance. So I do have sadly, I do have a I love me wall. Yeah, that's true. I have to compete with my older brother. He's a doctor, so you know.
Well, you need to get another cert up there.
That's true.
You know what? I'll print one out and send it to you. It'll be fake, but you know.
Well, yeah, who cares? People can't see it anyways. People can't see it.
Right, he won't see it anyway. It doesn't matter. All right, guys. Thank you so very much. Have a great week. I really appreciate you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Joe.
All righty. Bye-bye. Thank you for hanging with us through the entire interview. I really do appreciate it. I hope it was helpful in your security career and just trying to figure out what the heck we should be doing as citizens, business owners, security professionals, average Joe and Jane, whatever. Hopefully these things are helping you with that. And certainly we have a lot of training videos on the Practical Defense Systems channel. So go check those out as well. And don't forget, the channel is available on both YouTube and Rumble. I also post the videos on my GunGuyTV account on X. Check us out at pdsclasses.com. Come take a class with us. And thank you very much for watching.